One of the things I wanted to start with, I hate following Nicole because she's such a fantastic speaker. So again, thank you, Nicole, for a great overview of the blue economy and what NOAA's impressions of the new blue economy are. So I want to take a little bit deeper dive into that today with this session. And this is really to discuss what are the roles of government in promoting the blue economy. And you might be asking, because I'm asking myself, why you? What experience do you have that would get you up to lead this panel? Well, I want to give you a little bit of background on the NOAA Technology Partnerships Office. Our office is that nexus. We're trying to be that nexus between NOAA and the private sector. So we're responsible for two federally mandated programs. So these are programs that exist across the federal government in different ways, shapes, and forms, depending on the agency. But the first one is technology transfer. So we try to get technologies out of the NOAA laboratories, out from the bench to commercial application. So maximizing the benefit of taxpayer dollars that are invested into new technology and research and development by getting it out into the private sector and generating economic benefit. We're also responsible for cooperative research and development agreements. So we want to encourage public-private partnerships. This is another great opportunity that the federal government provides for small businesses, medium businesses, large businesses that is not often taken advantage of, or not as often as it probably could be. So it's very important to know that your federal government is available for you to work on R&D together in a way that's mutually beneficial for both the government, for the taxpayer, and for the private industry. So echoing basically what Nicole was saying. And then the last piece, which is one that's always the most exciting for folks when you're talking about small business, is the Small Business Innovation Research Program. And this is a funding program. So we do provide seed funding for innovative new ideas, small companies, to really get those ideas off the ground. There's additional business support that can come with this. So if you are talking about an innovator who has been a researcher in the past, we saw some folks yesterday who were in that position coming out of Scripps. You may not always have that business acumen, that business background that you need. You know your research, you know your science, and you know that you have a product that's most likely going to be pretty good, but you don't know how to translate that into a commercial entity. So the Small Business Innovation Research Program can help you with that. There are other programs. If you come over to our booth, we can talk to you a little bit about some of the other parts of the Department of Commerce as well that can help with these things. So the International Trade Administration is represented here. They are an outstanding group for helping companies to get information about export markets, information about export regulations, and export promotion in general. So I highly encourage you to take a look at that office. And there are other parts of commerce like the Patent and Trademark Office, Economic Development Office Administration, and the Minority Business Development Administration that are there to help small businesses to get off the ground. And that's really the purpose. So that is why I'm here. I am your personal representative for the Department of Commerce and those offices that are here to help you. So if you need anything, please do come to see me. So after that sales pitch, I'm going to introduce my distinguished panel here and start asking some questions. So on the end, we have Martin Stensland, who's the Counselor for Trade and Industrial Affairs at the Royal Norwegian Embassy in Washington, D.C. Welcome, sir. We have Pedro Pinto, who's the Consul General of Portugal from San Francisco, Consulate in San Francisco. And we have Amanda Netburn, who's the Deputy Division Chief of the NOAA Office of Oceanic and Ocean Exploration and Research. I'm sorry, I'm getting my own offices confused. It's like, where do you work, Amanda? So I will give you all a little bit of a chance to introduce yourselves and give some introductory remarks, and then I will dive into the questions. So why don't we start with Martin?
Okay. Is this on?
Yeah.
Sounds like it's on.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Derek. It's a pleasure to be here. And of course, thank you to Matt and to Michael for inviting me here. This is my first time in San Diego. It's not my first time in California, but it's the first time in San Diego. It's very different from the other places in California I've been to before. But I have known TMA for many years now. Had the opportunity to work with TMA before. We have a Norwegian cluster that works very closely with them, so that's a great relationship. And of course, I know about the excellent ocean research and ocean community that is here in San Diego with Scripps, and so it's great to be here. Ocean policy, ocean industries, top of the agenda for Norway, has been for many years. There is absolutely a great potential for further sustainable growth in the ocean industries through sound management and innovation in the ocean industries. And from the Norwegian government's perspective, we really have to support that potential to be utilized. For Norway, we have marine areas which are 5 times the size of our land areas. The ocean economy supports around 300,000 jobs. 70% of our export incomes are from the ocean industries. The ocean is work, it's life, it's our connectivity to the world, it's a source for food, it's a source for energy, so it's quite obvious that the oceans are very, very important for us. And at the same time, we have to secure the oceans from the impacts of climate change. We have to make sure that the oceans are clean and healthy as we go forward. So I just want to, in these introductory remarks, just point to some areas or some pillars in Norwegian ocean policy more broadly. We think that ocean policy has to be holistic. There has to be a holistic approach to the ocean economy and the oceans. Ocean policy has to be science-based. It has to support innovation, not least green technology and technology to reduce emissions and develop new forms of energy and resources. Many of the solutions to climate change are in the ocean industries. We have to work together with industry, and of course we're doing that. And we have to see our national efforts together with our international engagement and work globally with our partners around the world for sustainable oceans and the sustainable ocean economy. So that's my kind of sales pitch in the beginning.
Thank you very much. All right, next we'll turn it over to Pedro. If you want to tell us a little bit about your background and what the Portuguese government is thinking and working on right now.
Thank you very much, Derek. Thank you very much, Matt, and all of you. It's a great opportunity to be here. I must say that in San Diego, I feel very much at home, not just because California in general and San Diego in particular are very similar to Portugal, to those of you that have been there recently. Also, very close here in Point Loma, there's a huge Portuguese community, and I come here often. You've been missing out, Martin. It's very nice. And thirdly, the description that Mayor Todd Gloria just did, if you would change San Diego by Portugal in many aspects, you could relate to that. So I'm a career diplomat. I've served before in the mission of Portugal to the United Nations and the mission of Portugal to the European Union. And now I'm the Consul General of Portugal in San Francisco, responsible for California and the Western region. My colleague Daniela, that is there, we're both surfers. So that's what you do in Portugal. You're a diver, a sailor, a surfer. It's natural to be connected with the oceans. And actually, I would start by addressing now Portugal, very much by that angle. The sea for us is not an option. It's natural. It's in our genes, given our geography, given our history, given our culture, our food. Together with Japan and Iceland, we're top 3 in fish eaters. So it's something that it's very much in our soul, in our music, in our poetry, and obviously in our economy. Given the current double transition, digital and green, in Portugal, this obviously translates into blue economy. It's something that it's not a discussion. It's something that just naturally happens. If some of you were in the United Nations Ocean Conference in Lisbon recently, you must have felt that. And it's the whole Portuguese ecosystem of the blue economy that is together at this, obviously starting with the government. Just to a tangible reference of this, our Minister of Economy, it's Minister of Economy and Sea, just to give you an idea of the relevance that this has for Portugal. But it goes beyond government. There's the private companies, plenty of startups. There's obviously investors and VCs, Portuguese VCs, foundations. And a large example, I don't know, you might have heard of the Gulbenkian Foundation. It's the largest Portuguese foundation. Its revenues and its endowment for decades and decades came from oil. Just a few years ago, they let go of oil, and they have a structural investment in the ocean. But also other very relevant Portuguese actors and civil society and universities, be it from the Algarve in the south, the Azores in the middle of the Atlantic. It's something that very much the whole ecosystem is there. And to quote John Doerr, for those of you that are venture capitalists, the idea of scale and speed is something that we are very much keen on making happen and gaining impact. And for that, the connection with California, the west coast of the US with the west coast of Europe, I think would have great synergies. So for those of you that think of having a foot in Europe, Portugal, obviously together with Norway, in the other extreme of Europe, but very much we see ourselves, and humbly, but not modestly, we consider ourselves as a leader in the blue economy, and we would very much welcome and are open to partnerships to make it happen, to have real action. That was very much the idea of the United Nations Ocean Conference. You know, the science, it's been discussed. People are aware. Well, there are maybe some people outside of the box, but the mainstream knows what has to be done. Now it's time to act, and very much we want to act, and we would love to do it together with you. And but then we'll go into the funding part and so on. So I'll stay here.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. One of my takeaways from this map, by the way, I know you're doing something else, but you need to pay attention to this. We need a surfing line for the next event. So I don't know how you're going to make that happen. I think when we're up in La Jolla, just see if Scripps can make something happen. We'll get a... Okay. So, and I'm sure Carl would be happy about that as well. So that's on for next year. We're good. And last but not least, Amanda, why don't you give us a little bit of your background? I know for those of you who were here yesterday, you saw a really fantastic presentation on ocean exploration and the value of that, and we don't have the fun puffy fish behind us anymore, which is unfortunate. But Amanda also did a stint with the President's Office of Science and Technology Policy, sorry about that, OSTP, which is a really unique opportunity for federal employees to go work directly with the White House to implement key provisions of the administration's policies. So, Amanda, can you give us a little bit more background on that?
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Microphone is working, sounds like.
It is.
So for those who were there yesterday, but I do see a lot of new faces in the room. I think you got a pretty good perspective of my background and how I'm approaching this. I'm kind of coming at this conference from two very different perspectives. I serve as the Deputy Division Chief for Science and Technology at NOAA's Office of Ocean Exploration and Research, but I've been in that role for about 2 weeks. And prior to that, I've been down at the White House for 2 years, focused on federal ocean policy kind of across the board. So I'm, thinking about marine tech and partnerships with the private sector and across sectors, really thinking about both from that programmatic perspective of what we need for ocean exploration and seafloor mapping at kind of mass scale, but also the bigger picture, a lot of the things we heard Nicole talk about, coastal communities and climate resilience and all sorts of other topics. So, down at the White House, oceans have been really kind of, we're constantly looking at the intersection between oceans and everything else. So in this administration, climate and environmental justice have been up front of every single thing we do across all of our policies and our actions. And, ocean very much fits into both of those. I talked yesterday a lot about ocean climate solutions. And so how do we connect the oceans into all of the climate work that we're doing across the agencies and with our partners, recognizing, we've heard about sea level rise and all the challenges in coastal communities and the, just gonna keep, yesterday there was a table for the plenary speakers. I had a different plan here. Apologies.
You can use the chair.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. But just recognizing how critical understanding of the ocean is to actual people, and making sure that we're incorporating that in everything we do. In my role down at the White House, a lot of the work was working across the agencies, also interfacing with Congress on anything that related to ocean, and also engaging in international space, and just re-emphasizing what we do all know is how important partnership is at all sorts of different levels. So making sure we're engaging local communities, working with industry, working with the nonprofit sector, just kind of at all those different levels. And we as the federal government cannot do what we do. We are not the innovators. We are not, we need all of the types of folks who are in this room in order for us to, accomplish things like the 1.5 degree target for the Paris Agreement. We'll see what we come out of this week with, and the COP. Just excited for the rest of the conversation, share a little bit more about what we're doing.
Excellent. Thank you, Amanda. So yeah, it is striking to me the difference. I've been coming to this event for a number of years, and obviously we had the COVID interruption, but when we first showed up at this event, Michael was talking about the triple helix of government, academia, and industry, and he was really pushing this idea of the blue economy, and it wasn't really particularly well formed at that point. You had San Diego as a port city, you had Seattle as a port city. All of these important places were focused on their economic well-being. And so they were creating clusters. They were building their own economic development as they saw fit based on their local economy. But now, as this event has grown, there's been a lot more talk about a blue economy and bringing together these various components of the ecosystem that's related to the ocean more broadly, so not just for port cities, but for all the coastlines across the United States. And finally, this 2 years ago, when the new administration came in, there was an explicit statement that said the blue economy is important, and that filters down. So this is kind of that starting point for how governments start to get involved in these discussions. And when the president makes an announcement like that, I'm not sure, we'll find out a little bit from Norway and Portugal what their backgrounds have been on this, but when the president of the United States makes an announcement like that, it starts a lot of wheels turning within the agencies. It starts wheels turning at OSTP. And this really results in a lot of high-level plans to accomplish the goals that the administration wants to get to. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of dive into is to see what plans we have in place now, what plans we're working on, and how are these specifically driving economic benefit in each of the locations that we have. So I wanted to start with Pedro. So I know that the EU has developed the European Green Deal. There's a farm to fork strategy, and each of these contain extensive elements that are related to the blue economy specifically. So how do you see these policies have influenced the private sector activities in Portugal over the past few years?
Actually, since previously to San Francisco, as a Consul General, I was in the mission of Portugal to the European Union. I actually negotiated the Green Deal, a lot of all-nighters. It's a very, very substantial package that came out of, it's the recovery, somehow similar to the recovery package that the US has together with the IRA now. But it's for European standards, it's huge. It's a package that then each country has flexibility on how it directs the fund. And again, for Portugal, naturally, a substantial part of it will go to the digital, to the blue economy. The two pillars of the Green Deal is the digital and the green economy. And for us, the blue is very much a synthesis of these two. Blue tech is a natural recipient of these funds. And in Portugal, as I was mentioning, this is not something that we choose. It's something that it's natural for us. And for some years, I had some people that are our friends and very closely engaged in this, but I would sometimes feel that they were a bit ahead of their time. And now everything is coming together. So the government and the public funds as enablers, but then the rest of the ecosystem is right. And so things are happening. These public funds obviously are instrumental to make it happen. But I would say even more importantly is that together with them, you have VCs, like, for example, there's this case of Indico that about 8 months, a year ago, launched this blue fund of 50 million for blue economy projects in Portugal that combined environmental sustainability with economic sustainability, because obviously this can only happen if it's economically sustainability. We're doing this not just because we're do-gooders, not just because it is right, but because it's good business. And we see an advantage in being first movers on this. And obviously in the same way that the IRA here in the US is a game changer, in the same way the Green Deal and the public funds together, again, with civil society funds, foundations such as Gulbenkian, such as Oceano Azul. Again, those of you that were in the United Nations Ocean Conference certainly came across these institutions. This is clearly making a difference, because the ideas are there, the science is there. Now to translate them into market in a sustainable blue economy, the challenge is I would say it's investment. And we have a substantial source for it, but more is always welcome.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So let's move on to Martin in Norway. I know that you all have as well a green industrial initiative is what it's called. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what that strategy is, how that strategy is playing out in Norway?
Yeah, I can do that. And I think this goes really to the point that Pedro is making, is that how the blue and the green economy and the blue and the green technologies and the industries are interacting with each other. So the Norwegian government certainly recognize how challenged the ocean are and the ocean resources by climate change. And we have to reduce emissions. We have to drive forward development of new green industries. And then, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we truly believe that many of these solutions are found in the ocean in itself and in the ocean economy and the ocean industries. So from the Norwegian government, there is a clear ambition to drive development of green industries. There has been put forward a roadmap for this sort of continuous development of the green industries. And this roadmap stakes out the plans that the government is making for the industries and sort of supporting those efforts. Some sectors are prioritized. They are sectors with high importance, high potential. I'll mention a few: offshore wind, green shipping, hydrogen, CCS, batteries. There are a couple more too, but of course, all of these are either ocean-based or they are closely connected to the ocean economy. And of course, in this, when the government put forward a roadmap and a policy initiatives like that, it is really to support the development that is already going in, saying from the government's perspective that we really believe in these industries, we really see the value of them and the need for them, and to push and support the industries going forward. More sort of specific on ocean policies. I just want to mention a couple of instruments that we have in Norway that are important to sort of maintain this very, very important idea of having an ability to use the ocean and the ocean resources and at the same time ensure that it's healthy and safe. So integrated ocean management plans, they have been in place in Norway for a few years now, quite a few years. They are a framework for value creation through the sustainable use of marine resources in Norway. And these management plans, they build on all the sector rules and the regulations and the legislation based on science. They're updated regularly and ensure that this balance is maintained for our oceans and our ocean industries. And then the current government has a plan to next year, in addition to the management plans, develop and publish ocean industry plans. Because it's clear, we think, that there are, of course, a lot of existing industries in the ocean. There are a lot of new industries coming. We need to be more mindful and have a better framework for coexistence and co-use of the ocean space. So those plans will come next year. And then I think also that in this sort of holistic approach thinking, it's an important role of the government to support the transfer of technology, of competence and knowledge between the different industries and sectors in the ocean, and utilize those synergies that are there. And I think really that the cluster organizations are a really good example of how that takes place in practice, where you really get this concept of a blue economy or an ocean industry, but different technologies, different companies, different use, but they come together and work together to find out, okay, how can we commercialize, how can we export, how can we get those new technologies out in the market and continue to create jobs and values in the ocean economy. It's been an important instrument for the Norwegian government for many years to support what is really I would say an informal but an historic creation in our ocean economy, that there has been clusters, and then the government has come in to support with funding and sort of put a structure around this collaboration in order to really make the most out of these synergies between the different sectors. And that's another way sort of thinking, okay, the ocean space, there are a lot of different actors, a lot of different uses. It's important to see all of them holistically and together.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So Amanda, here in the United States, as was mentioned, we had two pieces of legislation. There was the Infrastructure Act a couple of years ago, and then there was the Inflation Reduction Act that has just passed and is floating around different agencies contemplating that. But there was also, you mentioned yesterday that there is the Ocean Climate Action Plan that is currently being developed as well. So can you talk a little bit about how you see those three things coming together to influence the economy?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there are a number of activities already taking place that incorporate the ocean into our response to the climate crisis, both from a information collection standpoint, but also, regulation implementation. We really recognize the need to kind of bring these all together into one cohesive suite of actions and activities, both to better communicate what we're doing and make sure that the ocean remains up front in everybody's mind when we think about addressing the climate, but also to continue to bring in and grow the resources that we need to be able to implement those ocean climate solutions. So again, in yesterday's talk, I talked about how it's been estimated that about 1/5 of the greenhouse gas reductions that are needed to meet the Paris targets can potentially be met through ocean climate solutions. And so, it's a big chunk. And so, some of the things that are going to be part of this Ocean Climate Action Plan are things like green shipping, blue carbon, biodiversity conservation and protection, marine renewable energy, ocean-based carbon dioxide removal, climate-ready aquaculture, fisheries, and more. So it's a lot of different activities. And again, there is a lot of, we've heard from Nicole and from others throughout the last few days, there's a lot of really amazing work already happening in this, but to kind of bring it all together into one cohesive plan and strategy it helps us to better work with all of you and across sectors to bring everyone in. We'll need a lot of innovation in order to be able to do all of these different activities. It also, you've talked about the two bills. There's a lot of funding right now, and this will help to guide where that funding is executed across all the different agencies from these two new bills that have a lot of money in them to address climate change. It also connects with a number of other administration priorities. So the Justice 40, which is the intent for 40% of the federal investment benefits to go to disadvantaged communities. So that is going to be a big part of this Ocean Climate Action Plan, is ensuring that we are both including local and impacted communities in the planning and decision making around ocean climate action and in its implementation. The goal that came in on, I think, the first day of the administration of implementing 30 gigawatts of offshore wind energy by 2030. That is going to require a lot of work in the ocean in order to be able to implement that and make sure we're doing it in a way that reduces impacts on other industries like fishing. And then zero emission shipping, which is something we're working closely with the International Maritime Organization on, and has been a big goal of this administration. So the Ocean Climate Action Plan, particularly for those from the states in this room, is currently there's a request for information for public comment to help inform what that plan is going to look like. Unfortunately, we've got about 2 days left of that public comment period. But if anyone is interested, I can make sure to, just find me afterwards, and I'll connect you with the link there so that you can put in comment there. I mean, I think there's would be really valuable to hear from this community and how we can make this work in a way that is, beneficial to this group and really brings you into the fold.
Excellent. So one of my follow-up questions on this, I'm going to go to Pedro first, is the EU plans were designed to encourage investment, outside investment, not just in government investment into these sectors. Are you seeing that type of activity happening at this point, or is it still too early? And what do you think needs to happen to continue to encourage that investment?
I certainly see it happening. But obviously there is margin of progression, and it's only natural because the potential is huge. But we do see again the whole ecosystem coming together, public funds and government here, not just at the national level but at the European level as enabler, and then the rest is coming with it. But I underline again the importance of the private sector, the investors, by themselves. I think this is good business, so we should be there. It's not just for the subsidies or the low-cost money. It's because it's real good investment. And so again, it is happening. We see it as startups, be it from biotech to renewables, and in renewables to blue hydrogen or wind, offshore. As well, wave energy, but just from large infrastructure projects, and some of you might have heard the deep sea port in Sines as an entry door to Europe for many of these renewables or energy sources that we're speaking, to other projects of smaller dimension, but all together is making the blue economy become tangible. I would say 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. For me, it's something, my grandfather was also a diplomat, and he was the head of representation of Portugal to the Montego Bay Convention 40 years ago. So I grew up a bit in this atmosphere, and my grandfather would tell me, the sea, the deep sea, the potential. And I said, yeah, sounds great. But how is this translated into? And now, for a while now, we see concrete, tangible business opportunities happening. And again, be it high-tech things or things so classic or traditional as canned fish, now with an innovative spin. And there's a huge growth in Portuguese exports there as well. So it goes from the most high-end modern technologies to the traditional industries related with the ocean. there are, again, if I would sum up in one word, one expression, it's happening. We feel it happening now.
It's interesting. You just reminded me of something. I was watching the end of Stanley Tucci's CNN show, which just irritates me to no end that somebody pays that man to go eat food and talk about it. So anyway, this is still fun, though. Don't get me wrong. But he was visiting Liguria in Italy, and their traditional fishing is still well in place, but their focus on sustainability and sustainable practices was really amazing, just to see how at that basic level, all the way from traditional fishing up to industrial fishing, that we're making these steps, which is fantastic. So sorry, I'm thinking about food, so I had to move on to that. So Martin, how about in Norway? Are you seeing similar moves for the private sector?
Yeah, and I think speaking of the sort of the role of government to support the blue industries, I think not only can governments come up with capital and different financing instruments, but also play a role in saying, hey, there are a lot of great investment opportunities in the blue economy. There are commercial opportunities, and there is possible to sort of take part in this green and blue revolution that is going on. And I think one important element for the Norwegian government is to make it easier for the financial markets to find out what is a sustainable investment and what is not necessarily one. And I think the EU taxonomy will be very important in that regard. We certainly also welcome private sector or international organizations setting standards for how to categorize and how to qualify sustainable investments in the ocean economy, of course, but more broadly as well across different industries. And then I also have to make a pitch for our organization called Invest in Norway. Just like Pedro was saying that he would like some investments into Portugal, we would like some investments in Norway as well. Invest in Norway is part of our trade promotion agency, Innovation Norway. They are based here in California, in San Francisco, and they can be helpful with finding opportunities and getting into the Norwegian market for American companies. So a little bit of a sales pitch right there.
Fantastic. You're allowed to do that. That's good. So Amanda, I'm going to take you bring the panel into a slightly different direction, which is more about that international collaboration. And tell me if you don't want to talk about this and I can move on. What is that role of governments coming together? And this is really going to be for all of you. Just what do governments need to do internationally to make this more sustainable for companies, but achievable really in terms of sustainability? I mean, that's really the key factor. Martin, you had talked a little bit about setting standards. I mean, is that the most important role? Is it just providing investment? So kind of give me some thoughts on that.
Yeah. I might actually start by pulling on the threads we started with here. So, I often think about the role of the government in bringing investment as creating the market, right? Creating the need, because often we are the ones doing the observations and collecting the data. And so, another big administration activity right now is on ocean mapping and exploration. It's called the National Ocean Mapping, Exploration, and Characterization Strategy. It was stood up as U.S. focused to make sure we have all the kind of baseline information we need within our waters, but has pretty ambitious goals of mapping the entire seafloor and exploring priority areas for all the different types of applications we've been talking about throughout this conference. In order to actually meet those goals is going to require a lot of new tools and implementation at a very different scale than we've been seeing. And so it really, helps create this market for the private sector to then come in and help us achieve that. There are parallels probably in a lot of different topics in the ocean. But I think that actually leads in nicely to what you're asking about, because that plugs into a number of international efforts, right? So we have things like Seabed 2030, and one of the UN decade projects is Challenger 150, which is focused on exploring the deep sea throughout the global ocean. And so there's this really important partnership and collaboration that needs to take place across the international scale, sharing of technologies, sharing of expertise, in order to be able to map and explore our entire ocean, so that we have that basic understanding that we need to be able to make decisions. Getting a little bit more directly to your question, I think, yes on standards. I think the more that we can kind of make those standards agreeable and shareable and make our data sets all working together is really critical, because we're not going to address the climate change by knowing everything that's in U.S. waters, right? That doesn't. We need to understand the world at scale.
I don't want to interrupt you on that.
Yeah.
How will we do that? do you have the grand answer for that? Is that something where an international body can come in and try to facilitate setting those standards for data, or is this something that needs to be done through private sector, or what's the?
Yeah, probably. And sorry to keep going back to this example, but it's probably the one that I'm most familiar with. Seabed 2030 has really brought all the different sectors to the table to agree on standards, to focus on mapping the seafloor and building out that map. And I showed yesterday we've gone from 7% of the global ocean to 21% of the global ocean mapped in the last 4 years. And it's not actually because we mapped that much of the ocean. It's because we went back to all the people who had data on their hard drives in all sorts of different formats and all sorts, right? And and it's because there's been a really heavy effort, but whether that's academic researchers, governments with the data, or the private sector who are starting to become more and more willing to share their data, even though it's privately owned and for business purposes, and that's why we've made such enormous progress. We agreed on some standards, and then we're able to go back to the community. So I think that is a really nice example. There are probably others, but I think that has been a really nice example where we've seen just incredible success and accomplishment because of everybody coming to the table, and the really hard work of that group.
I did not know that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Pedro.
Well, thank you very much. Subscribing what Amanda just said, as the government being kind of a beacon and fostering the creation of the market. It's something that I'm very well aware that in Norway and Portugal we're very much in the same wavelength. Regarding governance in general, you can look at it as a glass half full or a glass half empty, as everything in life. But when you think at the macro level, the foresight that the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea 40 years ago had, it's quite impressive. And when you think that 193 countries, as diverse as small island developing states and non-coastal states, are able to get this big picture, it's actually quite impressive. And having served again in the United Nations, I find incredible how we're able to come together, and the collective wisdom allow us this. Now it's time to translate that into concrete action, to do it at the micro level. And obviously there's a very substantial margin of progression in consolidating and empowering international governance on ocean issues, be it on the climate change, on pollution, on biodiversity, but also to translate again into concrete actions at the economic level. And these packages that we mentioned are instrumental. I think it is happening. Portugal, on its own, obviously has its national strategy for the oceans. It has partnerships, be it at bilateral level, be it at multilateral level. We see ourselves very much as a blue hub for international. For example, the European Agency for Maritime Security is in Lisbon. Some NGOs or relevant international institutions of the blue ecosystem are either in Portugal or moving to Portugal. So this helps also in terms of governance to create a spillover effect that then goes to the economy. And something that is also very relevant, it's at the local level. And just a simple example, but that also reflects this, Sausalito, it's just across the Golden Gate from San Francisco, and within a couple of weeks, they'll have an ocean hackathon between Cascais, which is a city very close to Lisbon, and Sausalito. So a partnership at the local level. And you know, all these small steps then can translate into something substantially bigger. Talking about Cascais, and obviously also here matching the pitch. Maybe some of you, maybe no, I know that some of you attended the Sustainable Blue Economy Investments Forum at the margins of the United Nations Ocean Conference that took place in Cascais in the end of June. Portugal will host the second forum in 2023. So I invite you all also to be there. I would dare say that it's the largest blue economy event nowadays, and great synergies with what we are doing here. And just to corollary of the pitch, the combination of natural conditions, talent, and quality of life. So if you want to go skiing, Norway, fantastic. If you want to go 300 days of sun, Portugal, it's hard to rival, but I guess it can be a win-win situation also with the US.
So, Martin, would you like to rebut that comment? I've been to Norway. There's more than just skiing.
I think it's a fact that Portugal has more sunny days than Norway has. Yeah, I think that's true. So maybe zooming a little bit out, I just would like to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy, which is now co-chaired by the president of Palau and the Norwegian prime minister. Of course, Portugal has been a member of the panel for years now, maybe since the beginning. And the US has also joined, so we are, of course, very pleased with that. And of course, an initiative like this, where governments come together, I think that can really make something happen. And in 2020, the members of the panel agreed to sustainably manage 100% of their ocean areas under national jurisdiction. And I think that is really a breakthrough, that you can convene all these different countries from different parts of the world and agree that we have to work together according to a set of standards to manage our oceans in order to continue to use them, but also to preserve them in the years to come. And I think that's really a great achievement. Then role of governments, of course, in regulations, just spending a few words talking about the shipping industry and the maritime industry. It's so crucial that the negotiations in the IMO can move forward in order to develop the GHG reduction strategy and come up with measures and agree on that. That is crucially important. Norway is, of course, a large shipping nation, so this means a lot to us, and we heavily engage in IMO. Then additional initiatives are important as well. There was a initiative that was launched before COP27, and with announcements brought forward at COP. It was called the Green Shipping Challenge. It was Norway and the US who came together, and sort of there's been so many great things happening from government side, from industry side, from the organizational side. We have to gather everything together and see, okay, what is actually happening in the industries and on government levels in terms of reducing emissions from shipping, and even some new announcements at COP as well. And I think the sort of regulatory side, the negotiation side, together with these initiatives where governments and companies and organizations can come together, and again, the government can be a beacon, as you said, Pedro. I think that's a very good That's a very good word. Create markets, create trust, be a pooling power. That is certainly an important role of the government in the ocean space as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. You've wrapped that up very nicely. And ironically, Michael Jones has his hand up, and I was going to just now take the last 5 minutes if I could for audience questions, but Michael trumps everybody else. So, Michael.
Have this opportunity, I think, is really good. The Norwegians and the Portuguese, in particular, have got a very defined ocean strategy. The government is, in both cases, putting money behind it in really material ways. In Portugal, the European Investment Bank, in order to create new funds, blue tag funds, there are several that have been created in Portugal. We have created TMA Europe in Portugal because we want our companies to be able to access funding that doesn't exist in the United States for companies. My question would be, NOAA obviously is a different kind of an organization, but there are things pending in the United States. There's legislation to fund clusters that Markowski has been carrying, and our representative, Scott Peters, is co-signed for that on the House side. And also the ability to create small business innovative investment corporations, SBICs through the SBA. I've asked our representative to see if the SBA would create blue tech funds in the United States. There are no funds in the United States focused on blue tech. I mean, obviously, there's funding from tech offices like yours, which are great, but the Valley of Death needs funding for companies. And so I'm wondering to what extent we can learn, an organization like NOAA is not going to fund it, but it could possibly help educate the SBA, help Congress if they're looking at funding for clusters. And I also would like to talk about blue bonds as something that I think should promote sustainability. Is something Pierre always is a big component of this. I've been talking to the World Bank, the American Development Bank, because we need to put funding behind real projects. I think I'm pretty much done.
Yeah, just in time.
So my question is, really from an investment point of view, what can we do, particularly in the United States, because Europe has understood that they need to institutionally help funding. Again, I know that NOAA is not going to do it, but they're the repository of so much information. I just wonder if there isn't a role to play to educate the SBA, because you can get very focused funds based on an industry through the SBA if you promote it. And I know that our representative has been trying to get their attention. So I think that would be something we could work on together. And then just for everybody, the idea of blue bonds to promote projects which technology can come in and create new ways of sequestration or decarbonization, but those funds don't exist today. So funding is so often at the root. I mean, my company is possibly going to set up an operation in Europe, partially because I can get funding there from investment funds that are blue tech oriented, and I can get access to European funding that just don't exist here, either one. So, that would be, from an internationalization point of view, how do we learn from each other on this funding side?
Yeah, and it is a very good question, and part of that internal, I don't want to say battle, but the tension within the United States, what is the role of the government? How far does the government go in terms of creating industries and, deciding who the winners and losers are going to be? And that's, as everybody's seen, that is a political discussion that continues on and on. So that one will continue to play out, I'm sure. My comment would be that I think there is a significant amount of money available. The one thing that I see is just a lack of coordination. So what you were basically saying is identifying, okay, well, if we decided that for the SBIR across all of the funding agencies that have an ocean-related mission, that we were going to offer specific subtopics that were related to the blue economy, that gives you a lot more buying power, a lot more leverage than we have right now. As it is, it's a bit scattered. So, and less coordinated, but I do want to let other folks comment on that as well.
Yeah, I mean,
before I get in trouble, so go ahead, please, Amanda.
No, I mean, I would second what you said. The way the U.S. research funding is pretty different from what I've seen in Europe and Israel and other places where you can kind of plan multi-years in advance and kind of have this really clear research agenda. It's just not how our funding cycles work. And so, it does make it that there is a lot of money out there. It's very distributed across agencies and even across NOAA. We don't do the best job of saying, here's all the funding that we have. Like the programs can be very siloed. And so trying to find the information can mean going down rabbit holes. And I think we really need to do a better job of that, of just, okay, if you're interested in this topic, here's all the places you can go to get potential funding. I do think that, with things like the Ocean Climate Action Plan, that is part of the intent, right? It's like, how do we communicate about this all in a coordinated way, so that we're making sure that we're reaching the right people? I mean, there's more to it than that, but that is part of kind of, let's put this all under one umbrella so that there is a much more kind of coherent plan and action for those who want to get involved.
Well, actually, the European Union does have a 7-year plan. Well, the budget tends to be 7 year. It's macro level. We're not the Soviet Union planning our economy.
So jealous.
But it's so difficult to reach an agreement that we decided to do, when we do it for 7 years to give some continuity. When I was doing this negotiation, the Swedish ambassador said, there are the three toughest moments in my life, or in anyone's life, is divorce, inheritances, and negotiating the European multi-annual financial framework. Everything goes. But as you were speaking, I remembered, when I was a kid, maybe some of you saw a baseball movie with Kevin Costner, and at a certain point he was saying, build it and they will come. And it's very much this idea also that we have. So we have this funding through the European Union at national level. And for us, again, it's natural to try to direct it for the blue economy because it's something that it's in our genes. Obviously, then it's up to the private sector to make use of it and make it happen. And obviously, we very much welcome additional capital. And if there is a place with capital for investment, is the United States and California. So it would be great to match the public investment and this overall framework, and the foundations that in Portugal are very much focusing on this with private sources of investment. But I do believe at this stage we're seeing the combination of a virtuous cycle.
Martin, give you the last word.
Yeah, I don't know if I have that much to add on this financing point. There's a recognition that the Norwegian government works very differently, and it's set up very differently for many obvious reasons than the U.S. government. And there's also there are differences with Portugal as well, with Portugal being an EU member. But I can say that Norwegian companies can also use the funds that are allocated for research and innovation and development in the EU as well, and those are important programs for Norway too, and we take part in those as well. And I think it's been just what I have to mention one more little plug at the end, because it goes into this sort of funding discussion, and it's that there will be built a new ocean space center in Norway, in Trondheim. It's been on the books for many years. There's been funding now for some years, and it's a huge chunk of the Trade Ministry's budget. It will be a physical laboratory, a digital laboratory, even a fjord laboratory for development and testing of new ocean technologies. And that's really a key part of what the government can do as well, is really funding infrastructure and research infrastructure, and innovation and testing infrastructure for the ocean economy. And that's, of course, an important part of the financing discussion as well.
Fantastic. Well, everybody, please join me in thanking our illustrious and fantastic panel.